Welcome to TrampWorld. In 1912 the Titanic was celebrated as the greatest achievement of human engineering. It was called the ship of dreams and even unsinkable. That word alone carried the weight of pride and confidence, but also the seeds of tragedy. Because when we believe we are untouchable, we stop paying attention to the details that keep us safe. The Titanic did not sink because of one single iceberg. It sank because warnings were ignored. It sank because lifeboats were not prepared for every passenger. It sank because the human belief in perfection blinded people to risk. It sank because of choices, not just circumstances. On that night more than 1,500 lives were lost. Families torn apart, dreams shattered, futures erased in icy waters. But within the heartbreak of the Titanic we also saw something powerful: courage and vulnerability side by side. Crew members gave their lives to save strangers. Musicians played to calm the fear of others. People faced their last moments not with denial but with dignity. This story is more than history, it is a mirror. The Titanic teaches us that overconfidence is dangerous, that ignoring small warnings can lead to catastrophic outcomes, and that human connection in moments of crisis is what truly matters. We often build our own unsinkable ships in our careers, relationships, and even our own self-image. We tell ourselves nothing can go wrong. But life has a way of reminding us that nothing is invincible. What protects us is not denial, but humility, honesty, and preparation. The Titanic's legacy is not just about a ship that sank, it is about the arrogance of certainty, the cost of ignoring vulnerability, and the truth that even in tragedy, the human spirit can rise with courage. The Titanic was hailed as unsinkable, yet it sank on its maiden voyage. Expend it, make it lengthy, don't add a heading and comma. The Titanic was hailed as unsinkable yet it sank on its maiden voyage, and this paradox has echoed through history as one of the greatest reminders of human vulnerability in the face of nature. When the ship was built it was described as the pinnacle of engineering, an achievement so advanced that newspapers and experts alike proclaimed it could never be defeated by the sea. It carried the aura of absolute confidence from the shipbuilders who boasted about its strength to the passengers who felt reassured that they were boarding not just a luxury liner but a vessel of invincibility. The Titanic symbolized progress, wealth, and modern power. It was more than a ship, it was a floating city meant to redefine what was possible on water. And yet on its very first journey across the Atlantic Ocean, tragedy struck and the so-called unsinkable ship met its fate in icy waters. The world was stunned not only by the disaster itself but by the fact that something believed to be perfect could collapse so suddenly. That contradiction between human pride and nature's power turned the Titanic into more than a maritime disaster. It became a symbol of the danger of overconfidence and the timeless truth that no matter how strong we think we are never beyond the reach of humility. Overconfidence and blind trust in technology played a tragic role because the Titanic was not simply a ship, it was a declaration of human triumph over nature, a message to the world that human innovation could conquer the seas. That belief created a dangerous sense of security for everyone involved, from the shipbuilders and owners to the passengers who felt certain they were safe aboard an indestructible vessel. The very claim of being unsinkable lulled decision-makers into lowering their guard. Warnings of icebergs were dismissed as routine concerns rather than urgent threats. Lifeboats were seen as unnecessary extras because surely they would never be used. Even the crew, trained in discipline and safety, carried with them a quiet assurance that their ship was stronger than any challenge it might face. This blind trust in technology masked the reality that every machine, no matter how sophisticated, has limits, and every invention is vulnerable to error or unforeseen conditions. Overconfidence prevented humility from guiding actions, and it silenced the voice of caution that could have saved lives. Instead of preparing for the worst, people placed their faith in steel hulls and advanced design, forgetting that nature does not bend to human pride. In the end, this misplaced trust cost more than a ship, it cost over 1,500 lives and left behind a lasting lesson that progress must always be balanced by respect for risk and humility in the face of uncertainty. Human decisions, not just the iceberg, sealed its fate because disasters of this scale are rarely caused by a single event but rather by a chain of choices made long before tragedy strikes. The Titanic collided with an iceberg, but the outcome of that collision was shaped by human judgment at every step. The decision to sail at high speed through iceberg-prone waters despite multiple warnings was a gamble made to preserve prestige and schedules. The choice to reduce the number of lifeboats in order to create more space for luxury decks was driven by appearances rather than safety. The belief that the ship was unsinkable led to a relaxed attitude toward emergency preparedness and drills that could have saved more lives. Even in the final hours, hesitation and denial delayed the evacuation process, costing precious minutes that could have doubled the number of survivors. These decisions were not made by chance, they were the results of human pride, ambition, and misplaced priorities. The iceberg was the visible trigger, but the real cause was hidden in the invisible culture of overconfidence and disregard for vulnerability. In this way, the Titanic's sinking serves as a haunting reminder that it is not only external forces that shape our destiny but also the choices we make and the risks we choose to ignore. The disaster revealed the danger of ignoring warnings because in the days and hours before the Titanic struck the iceberg, several messages were sent from nearby ships reporting massive fields of ice floating across the very route it was traveling. These warnings were clear, urgent, and repeated, yet they were not treated with the seriousness they demanded. Some were set aside because the wireless operators were too busy handling passenger messages, while others were acknowledged but dismissed under the belief that the Titanic could withstand anything. The mindset that nothing could threaten this great vessel became stronger than the reality of the situation, and so the crew continued to push forward at nearly full speed into dangerous waters. When warnings are ignored, they do not disappear, they simply wait to become consequences. In this case, the failure to listen transformed what could have been a manageable detour into one of history's deadliest maritime tragedies. The ignored signals serve as a metaphor for how often in life and leadership we receive caution signs, whether from people, circumstances, or our own intuition, but choose to push them aside because they seem inconvenient or challenge our confidence. The Titanic reminds us that every ignored warning is a missed opportunity to change course, and that true wisdom lies not in dismissing alerts but in humbly acting on them before it is too late. Courage and vulnerability were seen in passengers and crew that night, because when the truth of the disaster became undeniable, human nature was laid bare in its most powerful form. The ship that was once filled with laughter, fine dining, and music was suddenly transformed into a place of fear and chaos, yet within that darkness countless acts of bravery emerged. Crew members worked tirelessly to load lifeboats, knowing many of them would not survive, yet refusing to abandon their duty. Some men stepped back, allowing women and children to take their place on lifeboats despite the knowledge that it sealed their own fate. The band continued to play as the ship sank, not because it would save anyone but because it gave others a sense of calm in their final moments. Families held one another tightly, some choosing to stay together rather than be separated by lifeboats. In those hours, vulnerability was not hidden, it was embraced. People cried, prayed, and faced their mortality openly and with dignity. This combination of courage and vulnerability became the human legacy of the Titanic, far more lasting than the wreck itself at the bottom of the ocean. It showed that even when human pride leads us into tragedy, the strength of compassion, sacrifice, and honesty in the face of fear can shine brighter than any illusion of invincibility. The tragedy became a symbol of humility in the face of nature, because the Titanic represented everything humanity believed it had conquered. It was a floating palace built with the finest technology of its time, a vessel designed not only for luxury but for power and endurance. People called it unsinkable because they thought steel rivets and watertight compartments could outmatch the ocean itself. But nature proved otherwise in a single night, reminding the world that no matter how advanced or wealthy or confident we become, the forces of the natural world are greater than our inventions. The iceberg did not bend to the pride of men, it stood silently in the dark, waiting as the ship rushed toward it at full speed. When the collision came, it tore open the illusion of invincibility and exposed the truth that human progress always has limits. This was not simply the sinking of a ship, it was the collapse of arrogance and the rebirth of humility. In the years that followed, the Titanic became more than a wreck, it became a lesson carried through generations, teaching leaders, engineers, and ordinary people that nature must be respected, not underestimated. The tragedy reminds us that humility is not weakness, it is wisdom, because only by acknowledging our limits do we create the space to prepare, adapt, and survive. Lessons extend beyond ships to leadership, life, and human connection, because the story of the Titanic is not only about a vessel lost to the sea, it is about the choices, behaviors, and values that shape every part of human existence. Leaders who ignored warnings, put pride before safety, and cut corners for luxury showed how arrogance and short-sighted decisions can have devastating results. This same pattern plays out in boardrooms, classrooms, communities, and even families when those in positions of responsibility fail to listen or prepare. The Titanic teaches us that leadership is not about appearing invincible, it is about creating trust, acknowledging risk, and protecting those in your care. Beyond leadership, the tragedy speaks to life itself, because each of us builds our own versions of unsinkable ships, whether it is a career, a relationship, or an identity we believe can never fail. Yet life shows us again and again that nothing is beyond collapse, and the true strength lies not in denial but in resilience and adaptability. Finally, the Titanic revealed the power of human connection in its most raw and vulnerable form. Strangers helped one another, families clung together, and acts of sacrifice illuminated the darkness of that night. In our own lives, this lesson endures, reminding us that titles, wealth, and pride fade quickly, but the bonds of compassion, courage, and kindness are what carry us through crisis. The Titanic's story will always be about more than a ship. It is a reflection of what it means to lead life and connect with honesty and humility. In conclusion, the Titanic's story is not only about a ship that was lost, it is about the human spirit and the lessons we carry forward from one of history's greatest tragedies. It reminds us that no matter how powerful we believe our creations to be, nature and life will always demand respect. It shows us that arrogance and overconfidence can blind us, but humility and preparation can save us. It reveals that in the darkest moments, courage and vulnerability shine brightest, and that true strength lies not in claiming to be unsinkable but in admitting our limits and choosing connection. The Titanic sank more than a century ago, yet its lessons remain timeless, urging us to lead with responsibility, live with humility, and cherish the bonds that make us human.